All right, welcome everyone to a very special episode of the Mike Sanello Show, if we're going to call it that. As you guys have heard, I'm bailing on the dollar. Because I'm bailing on the dollar, I'm going to get myself into crypto. So I've decided to bring on a special guest to inform a noob like me as to how to go about that. But first, as you guys are probably aware, I'm backing all of this stuff up on Odyssey, and I would love to transition there full time. So if you guys want to see a truly free speech platform, check that out. Follow me down on Odyssey. I'm hopefully going to be transitioning not only away from the American dollar, but also away from YouTube and to a platform that is an actual platform and which actually promotes free speech. We will be coming back to Odyssey at the end of this conversation if we have time. So stay tuned for that. Also, at the end of today's conversation, of course, we are going to have some live Q&A. So if you have questions for today's guest, then sit tight. We will get them answered. We will get them asked. We will get them answered. So, as an introduction, to get people informed as to what we're going to be talking about today, there has been we have an unprecedented supply of money right now. We've seen the explosion of point of sale pricing. You guys have probably seen the post that I put together about about the Odyssey transition there, but you guys have probably seen this post that I put up on all my social media about the point of sale price of lumber going through the roof in just over 2 months. Funny enough, Tucker Carlson actually just talked about this last night as well. I'm not sure why my stinger is still showing up. I don't want to have the stinger show up. Sorry, folks. Technical difficulties as always. What would we have? What would it be if it weren't an episode of Mike Sanello Show without technical difficulties, of course, especially with today's guest who we had nonstop technical difficulties with in our previous conversation. Link to that is in this video's description, so you can check that out if you'd like. What we previously talked about was how it was crypto as basically not quite a speculative investment, but as a hedge against risk. So today, I'm going to bring back Joël Valenzuela to talk about the practical side of transitioning from U.S. currency, the dollar, to cryptocurrencies in a practical realm, and to actually use it as a substitute currency. I'm sick of spending monopoly money. It's time to get myself into crypto. And for that, we're going to go ahead and bring in Joël Valenzuela. Joël, thanks for coming on.
Hey, how's it going?
So, as I always do, at the beginning of each interview, let people know how they can follow you and how they can reach you.
Yeah, so basically, the biggest thing I do is I run my own channel, podcast show, whatever, that I call Digital Cash Network. And if you look on YouTube, which is probably where most people are watching it, just look up Digital Cash Network. It's right there. Of course, as you already mentioned, I'm much bigger on the censorship resistant kind of stuff, which is why I'm also on Odyssey, also Digital Cash Network, and audio podcasts and stuff. Just basically listen to my stuff if you're at all interested. Of course, after this conversation, you might be bored and be like, this guy's kind of a loser. I don't want to hear him anymore, in which case I understand. But if that's not the case, then look up Digital Cash Network and just follow my stuff.
All right, and we can just pump that into a search engine and find all of that. We don't need to have the exact information.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, easy enough to find you then. All right, so like I said, we had our previous conversation, and now I think this is the place to transition because I'm actually going to do this. I'm actually going to get my hands on some crypto. I threatened it last year. Now it's happening. I have a little tiny bit of cash to spend, so this is what's going to happen. I'm going to be converting it to crypto, and I'd like to actually spend it. So, Joël, you've actually done this entirely. So before we get started, because I think that your story is kind of going to inform this conversation, let's hear your story.
Yeah. So as far as like people thinking about crypto and stuff, it's easy to come from a crypto is a given kind of a standpoint. But let's just think about, from the principles of, let's say, a free society or liking to live free. So since as long as I can remember, I've been interested in the concept of human freedom because just about every metric I can think of shows that the freer places do better. People are happier, sunshines and rainbows, all that kind of stuff. And of course, at some point, you learn in school, or at least I did, right? Learn in homeschool as I did. Learn that how money comes around. What is money actually that we just take for granted? These pieces of paper we transmit back and forth. And at some point, of course, you have to go through, the comes from little stones to seashells to whatever else to then finally, gold and silver. And then at some point, just not gold and silver backed paper anymore. And that part was never quite adequately like explained as far as like why did we go away from it. And then of course you start hearing, well, might have been intentional, you can inflate more and you can do all this kind of stuff. And I feel like even with the most hardcore people who believe in a free society, there's just this big unaddressed part of, all right, yeah, well, it used to be backed by gold and whatever, now it's not, and then it sucks, and then okay, but like, what are you doing about it? And it just, I don't know, well, we complain. I mean, that's it. Like, okay, well, are you going to start putting legislation to re-back the dollar with gold or something? Are you going to like, nah, just kind of, that's it. And so it's, to me, it was one of those huge things where people just say, this thing is not good, yet here we are living like this. And for context, of course, I grew up in the north of Mexico, and during the 90s, like right after the peso crisis, and of course I remember my grandma having all these like old pesos that just were worthless. And it's like, well, why are these no good and the new ones are? They just made new ones, these weren't any good. And then of course I grew up with exchange rates of like 7 pesos to the dollar or whatever it was growing up. And then now it's like what, 28 or something. It's something obscenely worse, even considering how well the dollar is devalued. And so all this comes to a head when I'm just thinking, well, why do I have to live like this? Like, people are saying that this isn't any good. People are saying that, a dollar, a endlessly inflated fiat currency, is a terrible store of value, and that they're basically, the central banks are basically using this to cheat people out of their savings by just printing a whole bunch more, spending those, and then ours is worth less. And no one's talking about trying to get out of that. So this is where our good old friend and recent crypto supervillain Peter Schiff comes into the mix, because I remember he had, and I probably still does, a gold backed debit card. And when I heard about that, I'm like, this is it. This is the answer. I got to get one of these gold backed debit cards where I can have my life savings in gold and just swipe it and kind of spend it like that. And of course, not available to US customers. Oh, well, I am a dual citizen. How can I figure that out? And I was in the process of figuring out how to try to live off of gold, because, that's what every good Austrian economics kind of guide wants to do, right? And then, of course, I heard about this crypto stuff. Well, back then, just Bitcoin. So a friend of mine, while I was moving from Phoenix, where I was living at the time, up to New Hampshire, I stopped in Chicago, and we were having pizza. He's like, oh, hey, I don't have money to pay for my part of the pizza. Can I pay you in Bitcoin instead? I'm like, oh, I heard about that stuff. Sure, I'll give it a try. So I got paid for a part of a pizza, which is of course very fitting, as next month is Bitcoin Pizza Day, which commemorates the first ever crypto transaction for a physical good of 10,000 Bitcoin for a couple of pizzas. So anyway, it was pretty fitting there, and then that sort of got me started. And luckily, by the time I hit New Hampshire, I realized there's a lot of people here, a lot of fellow freedom lovers who actually care about this stuff and were using this stuff. And then that's just kind of like where the rabbit hole kind of journey begins. But basically it all begins with the idea of, I like freedom. That education causes me to realize that the money that government issues is not in our control and is not going to hold value long term. And then what can I actually do about it? Practically with gold and silver, even though I have some, no, I can't do anything. No one's going to take it. And so then the next step, okay, then I hit the crypto rabbit hole of, oh, guess what? This is digital gold, digital silver, or whatever. I can actually use this though. And
Right.
wow, like,
Right,
there you
and
go.
that's
Practical.
that's basically where that is a great segue for what our
Mm-hmm.
conversation is today compared to what it was about a year ago when we had this same conversation. We talked about fitting timing of things. Today happens to also be April 15th, which was at least formerly tax day. So it's kind of fitting that we're having this conversation today, that we're getting divested away from the dollar. So you've actually gotten to a point where you don't have anything that's
Yeah.
you're using entirely crypto from a practical standpoint to make your expenditures.
Yeah, I mean, I do have the occasional like piece of paper, like these euros for when I have to travel to the dark zones and stuff. But, pretty much, yeah. So it was somewhere around 2015, end of 2015. Uh, I had been using crypto on and off here and there because, around in New Hampshire, the Free Stater community has a lot of people and businesses that will, they're willing to take it, but it was very clandestine at the time. And it was towards the end of the year, I started to feel a little like uncomfortable. I started to talk about it too much, and I was started to feel like uncomfortable with my level of familiarity versus what I was saying about it. Because I say, oh, everyone should use this stuff, and then go back to swiping with the card. It's like, okay, well, maybe I should actually know what I'm doing about this. So I said, well, great experiment time. I'm going to just see if this actually works. So I'm going to stop accepting dollars and other fiat currencies. I'm going to stop accepting them for payment for goods and services and only take crypto. And that was at the end of 2015. I made that decision. And then by the middle of the next year, I decided to close my bank account. And, there've been tougher years than others in that whole journey. But on the whole, I think it's gotten a whole lot easier over time.
Right. So we talked about the last time the difference between speculative investments and using crypto as a substitute currency. Yeah. So just before we get started, as a matter of basically housekeeping, you want to just talk about how you viewed crypto and the role as a speculative investment versus as a substitute currency.
Yeah. So it's kind of got me to understand what speculative investment is a little bit more, because that wasn't really something I cared about before. And to be honest, I don't really care too much about it today. But basically, if you speculate, you're betting. You buy a speculative asset, you're expecting it to be worth more in the future for some, reason. And so in the case of Bitcoin specifically, way back in the day, people only cared about using this to buy and sell goods as a substitute money, not just as like the base money, but also a transaction system, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, as it said in that fateful white paper released, 2009, very long time ago already. And so basically anytime you had a lot of trading going on with Bitcoin, whether just to buy some to use on an online poker thing, or whether to just buy the faithful pizzas, or just other little things, or pay hosting providers for there's a few things that were happening in the beginning. And of course, the actual utility being used back and forth was, probably most of the actual value. Then at some point, people started to realize that this had huge potential. And so then people are willing to throw more money at it than necessarily the actual utilitarian value of it was then.
Right, as a medium of exchange, right? Its value as a medium of exchange, yeah.
And so then we've had a ton of, people buying, like anytime you just say like, oh, short the banks, long Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, any of that kind of language or attitude is all speculation, which does not mean that that's a bad thing necessarily. It just means you're betting that the financial system as it was is going to collapse at some point, and you need something that is not going to go that way. And so you're betting, this is going to be worth a lot more in the future.
So in the past conversation, we talked about it as a hedge against these sort of things, as a hedge against inflation, as a hedge against, you described the collapse of the dollar. I don't know that a hedge needs to be a hedge against a complete collapse. Like gold and silver, the value of gold and silver as a medium of exchange compared to the value of the U.S. dollar as a medium of exchange fluctuates. And sometimes the value of gold as a medium of exchange is significantly higher than the utility that, in a utilitarian perspective, that happens with money. Just as a quick plug, as an aside, I've also put in this video's description a link to my other channel, Mike Reads. Everything that we're talking about when it comes to currency is the entire first book of Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, and how it is that currency came to be, how it is that we transition from, like you said, Joel, from clamshells and beads to copper, and then from copper to silver, and then from silver to gold, and then through that to silver and gold. So you guys check that out on my channel if you want to. I read through the whole book on that channel. So a very, very interesting and informative read as to how currencies come to fruition. The digital currency story is a little tiny bit different, but the point is that when it serves as a medium of exchange, it's effectively the same story. So what you end up getting is just like you showed a euro just a minute ago.
Yeah.
So in the case of a speculative investment, you can buy euros because you think it might be a more valuable medium of exchange. And then there's going to Europe and being in these dark zones that we're going to get into in a minute, where you can't use crypto. So the only thing that's of value is the euro.
Yeah.
So that's a different idea here, where you're substituting crypto for the euro in these dark zones in Europe, and that's actually what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
So how has your story, how has your history, how has that informed how you would advise somebody who's a noob to all of this into getting into it? And I'm really looking for very specific technical stuff here, because I am going to be taking notes, because as you guys, as I've said, I'm doing this.
Yes. So, and it's funny when,
and by the way, but real quick, we got to get this out of the way.
Yes.
If anyone misconstrues us, we are not here to offer financial advice. This is not intended to be in any way that, don't take it that way. So go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, probably the last person to listen to. And as I was saying about, it's one of those things where sometimes when the more you understand, the harder it is to give like very simple yes, no type questions or answers and things like that. And so, everything I say is, of course, from my own, comes from my own experience, because I didn't want to be a hypothetical person. I wanted to do things with my own life. And so that's kind of where it comes from now. And everything I say should be tried and tested out. And if anything I say, if you find something that works better, please let me know so I can figure it out too. It isn't like okay, here's the guru who's going to tell you all the wise ways of doing stuff, and this is 100%, and you follow him, and if not, you're going to sue him because whatever. No, this is just a few ways I know how to do things. So that's a good way to start with the general disclaimer of yeah, this is just, it's kind of like, this is what I do.
All right, so what would you tell then? What is the first thing you would tell a noob who is like, I want to start spending crypto instead of US dollar? What's the first piece of advice you would offer in terms of your experience doing that sort of thing?
Yes. So the first thing, now this of course can be variable depending on where you are, who you know. If you're anywhere where if you know anyone who uses it in person, you should probably start hanging out with them. It just, for example, in my personal experience here in New Hampshire, and I actually host a couple of crypto meetups, and there's other people that host them, start going to those and see what you can do, see what we can talk about. And it's a little bit of a qualified recommendation, because a lot of crypto meetups are just people going and saying, man, it's going to the moon, and stuff like that. And so then you're going to get people saying, dude, just get XRP, it's going to in the moon and all this kind of stuff. And then that doesn't help you at all. In fact, I was just on a Twitter exchange today where someone was trying to tell me the exact same thing, and I was just asking him the simple questions of what can I do with it? And there was a rabbit hole of well, but it's going to be used as payment rails and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, but what can I do with it? And nothing in the end of the day. So basically, first, if you find any kind of meetup where, if you find any kind of way you can meet up in physical person with people like this and bounce stuff off of and try to use it, that's always a good thing. Especially because the worst part about crypto is fiat. So the worst part about getting into crypto, in my view, is the very step of getting on some sort of an exchange or brokerage service or something like that is going to take your bank account information, and then you go and buy the crypto and that stuff. That's the worst part of it. So the good thing about it, if you can meet up with person who has some on their phone, and you just give them $20, here you go, $20 or 20 euros or whatever. And then they will pay you, they will give you some crypto to then play with. That is the 100% best way to get started. Because
right, okay.
Other than that, it's just going to be okay, you get when you're serious about it, right? Which I don't know if you you should jump into it before playing around, or if you have any friend who can send you some, that's always best. But it helps to just kind of mess around with it, send it around, see if you can buy something small, all that kind of stuff. And then, all right, that's great. Now I need to go get more. So that's step 0, I would say, is if you can find some sort of a personal connection with someone who or some group of people who actually uses it. And the 2 keywords that I would kind of use for this would be probably the two most commonly used cryptocurrencies in actual everyday transactions, which would be Dash and Bitcoin Cash. I mean, I guess Bitcoin Cash is kind of two words, but whatever. So if you find a meetup where there's explicit words mentioned there, if you can't otherwise find it, then there's an actual chance people here will actually want to use it. If it's straight up Bitcoin meetup, who knows? Maybe if it's just like a crypto meetup or an Ethereum meetup or something like that, then very much likely probably not. It's probably more speculative. So anyway,
That's
enough on yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting that you say that. So I noticed too, you pointed out the importance and significance of in person versus virtual. So you live in New Hampshire, I live in Connecticut. So it seems to me like step 0 is not completed by you and I having conversations here in New Hampshire. Is that something related to proximity and the function of currency as a medium of exchange with proximity?
Possibly, I would rather click to classify it as having something to do with cryptocurrency as a peer-to-peer medium of exchange. And because if you can just go online to some soulless corporation and like buy some and like figure some stuff out, the best thing you can do with anything, like any money communicates value between people. And just like I'm talking to you right now, you talk with value. That's literally what paying people is. You just communicate your value to them and they're back and forth. And so the best way
I had a video on this actually on this channel about how prices do nothing more than an indicator of value.
Yes, exactly. And so if you want to actually transact with something peer to peer, that's peer to peer is the best way to actually get started, to kind of get your chops wet more or less, because you scan a code. I'm going to send you some. Oh, did it go through? I don't know. Let me check my Wi-Fi. Like all the bumps and bruises that might happen along the way. It's best if it's like there's that physical person to person connection while you're unfamiliar with the technology, right? Whereas instead of you just like buy some from this thing and then it just says I don't know, did it come, and you don't know how to use a block explorer, you don't know how to check here, and you go on some tech support, yeah, that's why step 0 is usually the best, right?
Right. So that's like an element of community then, rather than an element of proximity, which community doesn't necessarily require proximity in 2021.
Yes. And, of course, if you, as a substitute, you can just say, you can go take to Twitter or social media or some kind of other non-physical proximity, right? And just see if someone will send you or tip you $1 or $2 worth of whatever, and get started. And of course that's the next thing. But the problem is so many people are out there saying, hello sir, please, my mother's sick, can you give me like all your Bitcoin?
So all right, so it seems like you're telling me as a noob, before I go out and take $2,500 of my investments, pull them out of my investment portfolio and can convert them into cash, find a friend who's got $20 and just fiddle around with $20. So from a practical standpoint, I can get myself familiar with how it's actually used, so I can better inform how much I want to convert. I mean, am I reading this correctly?
Yes. Now, also, I mean, some people, so for example, as far as I'm able to remember, I've never bought any crypto at all. I've just received it in exchange for goods and services. And that's the absolute best way to do things, right? Because you don't have to go through everything else. And so if you can find some way to get started that way, that's of course the Holy Grail. Just understanding that a lot of times
most people have a paycheck, and the paycheck is going to be backed by fiat. So in order to do anything, they're going to have to convert that paycheck. In order to do anything in a system where they're going to be using it as a substitute currency, they'd have to use it like they use their dollars, which is take the paycheck, convert it to a viable medium, use the viable medium.
Yes. So step 1 then. Now we've, exhausted a lot of time on step 0. But step 1 would be get I guess they're called brokerage account, but people call them exchanges. Get some sort of an account, sign up to some sort of account, or if there's an ATM near you, which ATMs used to be more private.
Generic ATM or ATM specific to
crypto ATM. Okay. They used to be more private, and they still are to some extent. If you buy from some with a small amount, the only thing you have to do is put in your phone number. Like if you buy $50 or whatever, which is fantastic. The less ID you can have, the better. So let me just think off the top of my head. Let me give you three things to check out. First is a site called coinatmradar.com. Like coin is in like Bitcoin, right? ATM is in ATM, and radar is in boop.com. And that's basically an ATM finder for places you can buy, buy crypto close to you. So if there is one close to you, that's a great way, especially, if you want to, because like the physical characteristic of it, you walk over, you put in some paper. You don't have to worry about like, all this kind of like bank stuff. You just
do they typically work off of cash itself, like the physical currency, or can you do it with just like plastic?
Some of them you can do with like plastic, but at that point you'd probably be better off like going to some sort of an online service. But anyway, so at that point, that's the best one. If you can go put in some money, the exchange rates aren't going to be great. So it's just like to get started. It's not like this is where you go all the time. You put in $50, you put in your phone number. Hopefully they don't ask for your ID unless you start getting higher than that. And then, you get some crypto beamed to your phone. And then there you go. You're like, okay, now I get something to try out.
Okay, so it's beamed to your phone. So it's not like there's going to be some card that you can reload with these ATMs.
No.
So you'd have to use some sort of payment processor inside your phone and hold your phone up to the...
Yeah, you have to use what they call a wallet. So we're like at step one kind of thing. That's kind of like the second part of step one, which is, so first off, calling the ATM radar, that's where you go to go to find an ATM near you, which sometimes it's not around everyone. Sometimes it's in some like sketchy gas station somewhere, and you're like poking in there and looking at the crypto thing, and there's sketchy people. Like, you don't want to do, you might not want to do that. Not everyone does, right? Now, which, fun fact, I got these euros I keep on my desk from some ATM in Madrid because, I have no fiat currency, and I went to a conference in Madrid and I needed some. So I went and sold some of my crypto at an ATM right there. And it was a public, well-lit place. It was not sketchy at all. So that was good, but that's not always the case. So as part of step one, there's two other services I generally recommend because I've seen other people use them, is Uphold and Coinbase. Uphold being, holding up, right? Uphold and Coinbase are two brokerage sites or services which basically allow you to link a bank account and easily buy crypto. And that's a little bit, you can do that from anywhere. It doesn't have to be anywhere physically. So you can go on your computer, go to uphold.com, go to coinbase.com, and then you open an account. They're going to want you to put a picture of your ID or whatever. Usually you smiling, holding up your ID or whatever. And then just to say, so the government will let you transact, all that stuff. It's part of their regulations. It sucks, but it is. It is.
Yeah,
what
and
it
we'll
is.
go over regulatory hurdles at the end.
Yes. And so now we get to the concept of what is a wallet. A wallet is just like a money pouch, but it's like a digital money pouch, just like your real money pouch or whatever, right? So one of these kinds of accounts you get where you buy the crypto from, they hold it for you too. So you can buy some without getting a separate wallet, but you should eventually get a separate wallet. So just to kind of clarify that you can, and some people, they think that because they have a Coinbase account, that's their crypto wallet, which it is, but you don't actually control. It's like a bank account where the bank can go take your money at any time. It's the same thing here. So that's just
keeping money in a bank account and using a debit card versus just carrying cash in your pocket. If we're conceptually converting that to what people might understand better.
Yes. So if you're at step one here and you've actually gone through with it, you've done the annoying ID thing and you bought some. Now at this point, you have a crypto bank kind of, but you're in the system, but you just like have stuff that I guess legally you own, but whatever. So the next step would be to get what the cool kids call a non-custodial wallet. But basically it means, or a more technical way of saying it is a wallet where you control your own private keys. Forget all that.
It's going to be an app on your phone.
Yes.
That's all we're talking about.
The two, and I really wish the world was simpler, that there was like a one path to just go straight down but anyway, depending on where you are and what services you use, I use the cryptocurrency Dash very much so. And a lot of people will also recommend Bitcoin Cash. Again, those two ones I mentioned when looking for a meetup. So I'll just give you the options for both, right? So if you just look up Dash wallet in, I App Store, Play Store, whatever. Because a lot of this stuff works pretty well on mobile stuff, right? Now, and it just something about it being on your phone and being able to, it gives it a more physical feel to it anyway. And if you're going out into the world somewhere, you might want it, somewhere where you can kind of use it. So you get the either Dash wallet or there's the Bitcoin.com wallet. Those two I've used, and I know that they work very well, and I know that you keep control over your own funds. So those would be containers. It's kind of like the little like money clip you have in your pants or whatever. It's kind of like the other wallet. So then what you want to do is you want to practice taking some out from your account, right? The Coinbase, Uphold, whatever, and then putting it in the actual wallet that you control. And once you do that, it's like, hey, that's great. And you can, of course, just be careful with this. Like, let me give you another wallet, Edge, like the edge of a table or whatever, the edge of whatever. That one holds multiple currencies. It's not quite as easy or fun to use as the other ones, but it works too. And the thing, these are just apps. You just download any app you want, right? You can download
hold on,
all
before
three.
we get too far, it seems
Yes.
like if you're only going to have $50 and you're kind of just playing with it and just learning how it's used, I mean, does it not make sense to just have one currency just to simplify the usage of the currency?
Yeah, so pick one. Sometimes these things. So, like for example, where I'm at, and a lot of the services talk about work a lot better with Dash. Now, some people in some different areas the adoption around them might be a little bit more Bitcoin Cash heavy, which is why I kind of leave those two as options. So it's not someone's like, oh, I did what you said and no one around here, and then it's like, all right, forget about it. So when I talk about these getting multiple apps, the only reason for that is because the best thing you should do to learn how this stuff works is actually use it. And the best way to use it in a controlled environment is send and receive two little apps on your own phone, which is the equivalent of you have two different leather wallets. You take the money out and put it in this one, take it out, put it back in there. You just see how it works, because then let's send small amounts, let's send big amounts. And it usually works by copying and pasting a long cryptographic address, which is annoying to use, but hopefully pretty soon we'll be done with those things. And the way you do it shorthand a lot of times is scanning a QR code, which just inputs that info anyway. And especially now with all these, like, everyone got rid of physical menus because they were scared of the Rona and stuff. And now, like, everyone's
careful.
QR codes.
We're on YouTube. We are on YouTube.
Okay, I use code words for a reason anyway. So that's why you have like QR codes to scan. And so it makes you a little bit more familiar. So that just so you know how to send, receive, and like what it looks like. And just kind of like play around with it, right? That's step 1 or 2.
So in step 1, you said it's step 1A and step 1B, right? So step 1A was to find these ATMs. So I'm in rural Connecticut, and this is going to come up. This is a framework I'm going to bring up a few times throughout this conversation. If I look up and find out that there's not an ATM for a distance around me, is that kind of a stopgap? Is that kind of a point where it's like, well, then where you are, you kind of have to rethink how you're going to go about this?
Yeah. So if you don't find an ATM near you, that's just kind of like a better suggestion of like the safest, easiest way possible to like figure this stuff out. If you don't have it, then just go straight to the next part, which was get like
the online exchanges.
Or Coinbase thing.
Yeah.
The
online exchanges.
By the way, if you do an ATM and you buy like a $50 like once or maybe twice, and after that point, you're going to go to that step anyway, because other than that, you start buying higher amounts at these ATMs. You're going to have to give your ID anyway. It's going to be more inconvenient, and you're going to be paying a lot more in fees. Like that's like maybe 2%.
Kind of like using an ATM in general. If you're not using your bank's ATM, which is going to be the overwhelming majority of ATMs around the world, you're going to get whacked with a fee. So,
like for example, like I think an Uphold or Coinbase fee is somewhere around like 1%, right? So that's not too bad, right?
It's not too bad. $100, you pay $1 on that. It's not too bad now.
Yeah, and then some of these ATMs, I mean, I think there's more of them, so they're becoming more competitive. But some of them have like their rates listed, and it's like 15% or something horrendous like that.
Yeah, $15 for $100. No way, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, so you don't mind paying like buying like $50 like once or twice and eating like a few percent fee. But like when that's why you want to go to something a little bit more,
I see.
I guess, like institute more streamlined for that. And so with the send back and forth kind of a thing, you kind of figure out how it works. Now, when you're at that point where you're ready to start actually using it, where it's not like just a little bit of money, there is something you want to do, which is every wallet tells you to do this, which is back it up, which literally means take a pen and a paper. And again, don't touch it with electronics because that's always easy way to get hacked, I guess. Or maybe, you write down 12 words that are associated with your wallet. It's just like the secret passphrase that gets you back into your money. And that's literally it. So like if you have I guess pull out I have a Post-it note as a prop. I'll take this one off because it actually has stuff I like on it. But if you take a Post-it note and where's my pen? It's down here. And you take your pen, you write down 12 words, and then you put that in a lockbox somewhere. You lose everything. And then at some other point in the future, you get this lockbox and get these 12 words. You put them into an app that supports it. And, it could be any app. There's dozens of them, right? Then you just get all your money back. Like all your money is access to
What do you mean by lose all of the money?
Well, so here, basically, if you get your phone or whatever, and then you put crypto into the phone,
and then you drop your phone and the phone dies.
It's gone. It's all gone because the access to the money is stored on the device itself.
Interesting.
Not
okay.
in an account, because
so
that's how
the phone becomes the wallet itself, right? So in that case, if I lose my wallet at the laundromat,
all the money's out. Right?
All the money's gone. Right.
Except with crypto, you have the magic backup thing of the 12-word phrase. So if you dropped your phone in the toilet and it got destroyed, but you have the 12-word backup, then when you get a new phone, it still sucks you lost your phone, but then you download one of the apps again, and hey, you have no money in there. Oh, wait, but then you enter recovery phrase, and you enter those 12 words. Oh, all the money's back. So, which could be pretty magical if you think about it. This is where you start to think, okay, what happens if the government's trying to come after me? I have to flee the country. I get 12 words tattooed under my armpit, and that's it. I just swim across the Atlantic or whatever crazy scenario you have. You end up in another continent. You grow a big old
Jeremy,
beard.
If you're listening.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, again, Jeremy, he probably already has his seed phrase tattooed somewhere on his body. Not that I've seen him, but whatever.
Yeah.
And then you show up in another country, you get a computer, whatever, like a little cyber cafe, and you plug in you plug it in. All your life savings is back. Think about that's a pretty powerful thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially because when you deal with that with like a credit card, like just a generic credit card, if your wallet disappears, then the credit card, I mean, it's going to be a pain in the butt dealing with that. So I mean, that kind of naturally segues into some of the pratfalls and you've experienced over the course of this. But I'll get to that in just a minute because we are in the middle of basically a how-to, which is just super informative into getting into cryptocurrency as a proper substitute currency.
Yes.
So we talked about the best marketplace for noobs in this circumstance. And this question, it's not financial advice. What is, because we're talking about point of sale transactions. What have you found to be the most conducive currency to point of sale transactions for the noob?
So unequivocal, with a pretty decent margin, I would have to go with Dash still. And I use Bitcoin Cash as well, sometimes in point of sale transactions when there's some place it doesn't take them or whatever. But the apps tend to work out in a much more user-friendly way. And I'm trying to, my brain's kind of going through, how far down in the rabbit hole do we have to go at this point? But
I mean, you've got a picture of the Doge in your background. The folks at home can't see it because I've cropped it off the
it's fine
to fit everybody in. But
little Doge pillow. But basically either one should work decently. However, some services will recognize Dash transactions as being finalized in about 2 seconds, whereas they would wait 10, 20, 30 minutes for Bitcoin Cash. So some cases, basically, they're always finalized in under 2 seconds, whereas Bitcoin Cash is always finalized in much longer, but some services just like accept it all right away. So you don't really tell the difference. But just like for those edge cases, which might become a lot more common. So for example, there's a brewer down here in Merrimack, Abel Ebenezer, which is a fantastic pro-liberty business.
Give them a
And
plug.
Yep. And they started bringthebeers.com as their delivery service, but I think it's only New Hampshire. Anyway, they started taking crypto payments through a service called Coin Payments. That's their payment processor. Coin Payments makes you wait a long time for Bitcoin Cash. It does not make you wait a long time with Dash. So, for example, if you're going to go there, you'd pay your bill and then be like, they say, I think it'll go through. It's okay. Get out of here. Or they make you wait 10 minutes to get your beer and leave with it, as opposed to, with Dash, it'd be like right away. So that's the one reason I have to say. And now, of course, in the past, I have worked for Dash directly for the organization around it and stuff. Even that's no longer the case today. I don't want to come off as like shilling things too much or whatever like that. But I'm just saying, like, this is about as honestly as I can.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these drawbacks here, because it sounds like once we get to this point where we have the wallet and we have the phone and we have the backup and we have all these apps and we have the marketplace that we're familiar with, and we're getting ready to move, and I'm able now to make an informed decision as to how much cash I want to convert to crypto, and I have some experience, not much, but some experience with determining where point of sale transactions can actually take place. So let's talk about that point right there, where I'm just about to make the transition, or I have made the transition, and I'm sure that this hasn't been the smoothest process for you. And I'm sure that there have been some downsides to doing this and some hurdles that you might expect to run into. And I'm sure that you've overcome some of these hurdles, so it would be informative to know where to expect them and how to overcome them. So I'll start off with this. Well, let's start off with the generic question. What is the biggest pratfall that you've run into? What is the biggest hurdle you've run into in terms of practical use, and how have you overcome it?
So the biggest pitfall, the biggest barrier to using crypto as a daily money over the years has always been not enough people accepting it now, or not a lot of people accepting it. Clearly there's been enough for me to get by, right? But a lot of it's been, ugly hacks back in, which is getting better all the time. The absolute most specific area of not enough people accepting it has been in the bills category, specifically like the electricity bill, your sewage bill, your internet bill, things like those kinds of like the utility bill stuff that's like goes to your house and stuff has been something that's been very difficult. And I've found ways to deal with it here and there.
Without doing an exchange.
Yes. So there have been sites and there have been bill pay services out there. There are actually quite a few reliable ones, just not in the US, because the US is terrible with the financial system. But like, for example, in Canada, there's a couple systems you can use. Just pay your electricity bill with crypto, and they don't require ID or anything.
So it's a third party. It's a third party that acts as an intermediary between you and AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon.
Yes, that kind of stuff it's in other countries in Europe as well, and Brazil. There's a bunch of services that do that kind of stuff. It's just in the US, there have been a couple that have come and gone, and it's just the regulatory environment is just so hostile in terms of like the financial services type stuff.
So if if a noob is thinking about doing this, things like gas, things like lumber, things like groceries are going to be significantly easier to go about this with than paying your phone bill. Yes.
Well, the exception is the phone bill. So there's this fantastic.
Okay, fine. The electric bill, the water bill, your taxes.
Yes, that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff is so. If you're going from the perspective of you already are completely plugged into the fiat system, and you're trying to pay stuff with crypto, that kind of stuff isn't that big of a pitfall, right? Because you're just pay other things with crypto for now. right? It's literally that simple. It's like, oh, that's fine. It just, if you're someone who's like unbanked like me, who's trying to actually do this stuff, then if someone's like, hey, close my bank account to be just like you, what can I, I'm like, oh God, then that becomes more of a
I see.
pain to get around. But
Yeah,
like for the average,
toe in rather than cannonball in.
yeah. So the for the cannonballs out there, that becomes a little bit more annoying. But for like the towing people, who cares? Just step in a different part of the pool, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So in that regard too, I mean, you're in New Hampshire now. I
Mm-hmm.
presume you moved to New Hampshire, given the history that you gave us at the beginning of this
Yes.
conversation. Can you talk about how that move and how where people might actually be informing this decision and how they would convert to crypto? For example, I live in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
It's well known to be an extremely blue state. You live in New
Mm-hmm.
Hampshire, home of the Free State Project, and which is a deliberate effort to get libertarians in to create like a small state of just libertarians. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
libertarian haven, if you will. And
Yeah.
I would imagine crypto's effectiveness as a medium of exchange in a place like New Hampshire might be more effective than, say, rural Connecticut. So can you talk about how like location might affect some of these decisions?
Yeah. So as we're talking about with anything, we're talking about a peer-to-peer digital cash system, right? And peer-to-peer means person to person. And if there are more people around you who are feeling like this, who, believe also they should be ditching the fiat system, then there's more peers to pay. And so, for example, if you have a group of buddies, like just a few, right? Even if it's just you and a half dozen of you, and you just meet up once in a while, and then you pester a couple of them, oh, you should get into the crypto too. Yeah, me too. Okay, fine. You go out to eat, one person, pays the bill, and then the other one, I'll pay him in crypto. And then that's already like a good little, you just take turns kind of doing that. Um, that's already like a good thing. And then how many, I mean, if you're going to have friends, most of them should be gainfully employed, right? And if they have some of them might even have businesses. Some people might do something useful that they're willing to take money for. And then, of course, it gets to, hey, why don't you take crypto for your business? Oh, I don't know about, eventually you build like a small network of people that kind of does this sort of thing. So that's the magic of where I'm at, is there's a lot of people like this. There's a big group of liberty lovers I can draw on. A lot of people are already ahead of me on that kind of stuff. I don't really have to sell it, but it doesn't mean it can't be done anywhere else. So that's the best kind of location based kind of a thing. But thankfully,
So I mean, it sounds like when you were saying raw numbers, it sounds like a place like New York City, which is very, very, I'll describe it as blue, it just has a ton of people. So there's going to
mhm,
be invariably a collective of people who are into crypto. Whereas a place
yeah,
that's also very, very, we'll call it blue and
mhm.
dedicated to the fiat system, but is rural, you might have a little bit more struggle doing that.
Yeah, you could. I mean, it's all about person to person stuff. So if you know your local coffee shop owner, your local whatever, wherever you go, wherever you do business, if you know them, it's a lot of an easier time. I'm sure they're talking, you start talking about, the collapsing economy and stuff, and they're a little worried. And I'm saying it just eventually this kind of stuff goes, right?
Right. So
So
your personal trainer would be a great place to start then.
yes, for example. Now, a good thing is these days you don't really need. There's a lot of intermediary services that exist today that make it so that you don't really have to have this person-to-person connection with so many different people in order to be able to use crypto, which is a fantastic thing.
So are you familiar with Google Pay?
Yeah, I
I know.
don't use it obviously, but
I
yeah.
know. I'm just saying from a practical standpoint. If I hold my
Hmm.
phone, so we have I'm going to just use some objects here. And this is going to be really terrible, but so you have
Hmm.
your point of sale software. So you guys are going to have to imagine my calculator as like the point of sale thing that's got, you put your card in for the chip and you swipe on the side if you don't have a
Hmm.
chip or whatever. And then there's apps like Google Pay and Apple Pay where you can hold your phone up and it takes it, right?
Hmm.
So I imagine that's how this works from a physical, tangible standpoint.
Similar. It's more of a scan a QR code with your little camera on your phone. There are some tap and pay
No, I
kind
mean
of.
as far as paying at the grocery store, let's say.
Yes. So it's something like similar to that. So I'm trying to think, you know, as everything, of course, turns into a whole bunch of different layers of nuance and stuff. At businesses around here that do accept crypto directly, what I do is I go up there, they turn around the screen, I got a little QR code, and I scan it, beep, and then I pay, and it goes.
Okay, they give you the QR code, or you give them it somehow?
They have it on the screen of whatever. And
Okay.
so a great example of they kind of like a two birds with one stone kind of a thing is Walmart. So is there a Walmart close to you? Do you know?
Yes,
Okay,
very.
that's good. So there, have you ever used Walmart Pay, or do you know what it is, or have you
I know what
seen?
it is. It's the same thing as Google Wallet.
Yes. So that's going to be pretty much the exact same experience. Is there's a QR code somewhere, you scan it and then pay, and it goes. Now, the bonus of that is you can load if you have your Walmart app, your Walmart Pay, whatever, you can load your balance rather than just put like a credit card in there or something. You can load that with gift cards or gift codes, which you can also buy with crypto. So that's one of those ways where, for example, I pay for my gas with crypto. There's a couple different ways, but like one of those ways is there's a Walmart with a gas pump not too far from me. And so I go there, I buy, and there's a little bit of an extra prep time in this case, but like, I'm driving over, I buy a gift card, a Walmart gift card with crypto, put it into the Walmart Pay app, and then I just scan it at the pump, and there you go. And then they actually give you 3 cents off per gallon to do that.
Hmm.
And then I get a little bit more off by using the service that lets me do that.
Hmm.
So that's one way I pay for gas, for example. Let me see if I have on me anymore. But if you can use so let me just jump to like the next step, right? Next step you should do if you're like figuring out how to buy stuff, right? Is once you got you got your wallet, right? You've learned how to back it up. You send back and forth. You know how it works. The easiest way to buy something is probably buy Amazon credit because everyone uses Amazon. Oh, you don't use Amazon?
Yeah, I'm in a personal boycott that's been going on for about 2.5 months. And as an owner of a media production company, let me tell you how hard that's been.
Well, what do you use instead?
BH Photo where I can, and a lot of Facebook Marketplace, a lot of get in a car and drive God knows how long.
Yeah, well, Facebook Marketplace is also a great place, just like Craigslist, to like ask them, hey, will you take crypto for this?
True.
And this year, you might see a lot of yeses start popping out. But anyway, just because of the universal nature of it, so especially in the US, for people that don't have proximity to places that take it directly, there's a great site, app, whatever, called bitrefill.com. Bitrefill. And I first started using that to pay my phone bill because I have like a prepaid phone that's not attached to my name or anything like that. And I never touched fiat to it. And I just go to bitrefill.com and then I enter my phone number and pay it. And there we go. I pay my phone bill every month through that app. But also you can buy stuff like gift card credit to just about anything. So then say you use your $20 worth of whatever crypto you got, or I think Bitrefill only does Dash. I don't think they do Bitcoin Cash, but whatever. So you bought $20 worth of Dash. You got it on your little phone. And then you go to Bitrefill, buy $20 worth of Amazon credit, and just apply it to your order before you go. Even if it's like a $150 order, most of it is on your card. But then $20 of it got paid for, and you're like, oh wow, that's cool. That's safe. I don't have to like, be
Okay.
embarrassed
So
by trying
it sounds like the
something.
short version of this story is that you can use crypto to effectively as effectively a medium for Amazon tokens, if you will.
Yes.
And you can buy stuff that you would normally buy on Amazon just with that instead of linking it
Yes.
to a credit card. And
Yes.
speaking of which, you said earlier on, and I just want to make this point clear,
Mm-hmm.
Peter Schiff talked about the gold card.
Mm-hmm.
Peter Schiff, who has recently actually started to come around to cryptocurrency,
Hmm.
and I think you mentioned earlier on, and I want to make this point clear that something effectively equivalent to that, where you can just take a credit card or a piece of plastic with a chip, plug it into the ubiquitous chip readers. I don't know what they're called at this point, and have it deduct from your wallet. Does that exist?
Trying to think. So there are like just like an exchange like we're talking about. There are custodial services that again you don't hold your crypto, they hold it for you that have an actual debit card associated with it that you can use like that.
I see.
Now, of course, that's not something that I recommend, but if that's what people already have and they want
Why
to
do you
use
not
that,
recommend that?
well, because first off, you're paying through a credit card provider, same as anything. It's literally just a credit card or debit card or whatever.
So there's a
And
security risk there, is what you're implying.
well, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, you're continuing to support the old payment rail systems and stuff like that at the same time as all your money is somewhere in a bank like account where you don't control it, which is kind of the entire point. So, the one thing you're gaining over using straight fiat is, it doesn't crash all the
Autonomy.
time.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one thing you're gaining by using the card, which, yeah, it's fine. It's, especially if you keep all your money somewhere else and you only move it onto the card platform for the amounts you need to buy, it's better than nothing. But yeah, so there's that. The actual, like, the thing about cards, one of the things that sucks, that's convenient about cards, but it sucks, which is one reason I hate them, is they can just take money from you. Like, someone gets your credit card number, whoop, they just take money out of your account.
Very true.
It's just like giving someone the keys to your wallet every time you want to pay.
Right.
And then just like someone can just whoop start taking money out.
So maybe somebody isn't as risk averse as you and I are, and is willing to do that. So those options do exist.
Yes, I believe there's even, and like I mentioned, the service Uphold. I believe they have a card that's
So Uphold is one of those companies that has one of these cards.
Yes,
that allows you to do that. Okay.
Yes, if you
that's
want to just do it that way.
All right. And now, as far as payment is concerned, so I think we talked earlier on, as we're going to segue from this onto the final hurdle, which is the regulatory hurdle. When most people get paid, they either get it direct deposited into a checking account or they get a paycheck. Now, in order to convert that paycheck to crypto, a lot of companies just aren't going to pay you in crypto, no matter what. It's just not going to happen. And most people like their jobs. So it sounds to me like what we're doing. So it sounds to me like there's going to have to be an exchange in that transaction. So what's the best way to go about taking a paycheck and converting it, and the best way to go from having it deposited directly into your checking account and converting it?
Yeah. So there's two ways of doing that. The probably standard way, especially when you're just dipping your toe in, what would be you get paid direct deposit, whatever, into your checking account, and you have that account linked to, say, a platform like Uphold, and then you just manually go in there and buy some crypto with some of the money you got. That's probably how most people are going to do it. Now, some people who are just all in, there's this service called bitwage.com, which if you just give that, you create an account with them, you put that direct deposit information instead.
Cool.
And so when your employer does a direct deposit or whatever, it just gets auto converted to crypto, and then there you go. So that's a little bit more of like it misses a step of you holding onto the fiat and then you going and buying some yourself. It just kind of automatically goes through.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask about automating these processes and stuff. So that's cool. That's really cool to know. That is bitwage.com.
Yes. And so that's pretty much as good as you're going to get as far as it goes straight in. There's some other entities out, I believe Strike, it's called Strike Payments, is something that does a similar thing too, but with the Bitcoin Lightning Network, which is a completely different subject, for another hour-long video, I'm sure. But there's either Bitwage is the big one, the OG. There's a couple others that have been springing up here and there. But basically, yeah, that's like one of those services that works for that.
So, okay, so the last thing, so we talked about how you would do it through direct deposit. It sounds like you're saying that if we have a check, a physical check is going to have to go into the bank, and that's where you're going to have to make those transactions from.
Yes.
Or convert it to cash and ATM it.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So that's good to know. That's good to clarify on that matter. And that's actually really cool to have that automated process that kind of gets over that hurdle. So speaking of which, here's the last hurdle that we're going to be talking about, and we're running way over. So do you have time to hang out?
Yeah, sure.
All right, cool. So the last hurdle is the regulatory hurdle. And that is largely because I think, in my opinion, I'm going to inject opinion into this conversation. It's largely because the regulatory agencies and bodies that normally govern this type of thing are just so inept and so incompetent in understanding how these things work that it's led to hurdles that really don't need to be there in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of places. So let's talk about inform somebody like me who's a noob as to what
Mm-hmm.
kind of regulatory hurdles I'm going to run into if I start exchanging U.S. currency for crypto and start spending it as a currency.
Well, so the funny thing about that kind of question is I don't know if there's a person alive who can give a satisfactory answer, including people who work for the government, because the regulatory system around crypto, which is something they're just now starting to acknowledge exists, is very, not only in its infancy, but it's very like convoluted, and just as we mentioned with the SEC case against LBRY, there's a lot of like, wait, what? Like there's a lot of like you said this, but you mean something else. But logically, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. Basically, as far as I'm aware, and this is, of course, like the bigger, disclaimer people should give rather than just this is not financial advice, is also this is actually not legal advice. And if you're scared of the tax man, you absolutely should get a qualified professional to sort of figure that kind of stuff out. That being said, this is just what this jackass has heard over time. Pretty much what's cared about is capital gains, which is you buy crypto, it goes up in value, you sell it, you make a profit. That's the kind of stuff that you're generally worried about. And so if you have like let's say a Coinbase account in this hypothetical, you buy like 12 grand worth of crypto, and then it's worth 50 grand. And then you sell it back for dollars. That would trigger an event where you would probably want to make sure to file that as capital gains. That's the basics. Now, as far as like like what happens, it goes way up and then it goes way down, and you didn't touch it in the meantime, then that would not, in my understanding. So the big thing is, I believe there's always some, and of course this is one of those things where it could be, depending on when you're listening to this situation could be a little different. But there have been a bunch of, at least one law that was pushed for, I don't remember whatever happened to it, to have an exception to this kind of a rule for a certain small amount, like under $1,000 or under, several thousand
Where
dollars, or
you
whatever
realize a windfall gain, yeah.
Yeah, that they're just like, it doesn't matter, it's up and down or whatever. So generally speaking, I have not heard of anyone who uses crypto, who buys and sells things with it, who doesn't do giant things, with it, that has had to like nickel and dime report, like, okay, well, I have like $5 worth of crypto. It went up to $7 and I bought a coffee with it. And like, I have not heard of a case where people are like, super concerned about that kind of stuff. It's mostly, you bought this much, how much, do you have at the end, that kind of stuff. So in those cases, there are some friends I do know at a site called node40.com. Node is in like a, an online node or whatever you're running. Node40.com they have some pretty good ways of basically accounting for everything. And so, for example, if someone's full on into the crypto stuff and they are just buying and selling it, they just buy a bunch of crypto and then they receive it for payments, they send it, they buy this, they do whatever, and it's just a complete mess. They just turn over their stuff to this accounting firm and then they just figure it all out for them and say, oh, okay, you owe this much. That's the simplest thing, and they're specialists in this kind of stuff.
I mean, is that what you do? It is April 15th, so it's an apropos question to ask. Is that basically what you do with your taxes? Hand it off to the accountant and whatever he says?
I could neither confirm nor deny rumors of my involvement with that woman, Miss Lewinsky, or whatever.
Yeah. I don't know how much you want to reveal about your private life here.
Basically, that's what a lot of people should probably be doing, is finding someone to kind of do that kind of stuff with. And of course, that's one way of saying it. The other way of saying things is, depending on who you're talking to, taxation is theft, right? So that's the thing, is like, whenever you're telling people, you're going on a show saying, oh, live off the crypto stuff because it's great, and you get to avoid, you get to take power away from the government. There's always like the, how people how should people morally live their lives versus how should people practically live their lives, then of course versus how do you live your life, and there's three extremely separate questions, and so I'll leave it with just the second one answered for now, because the
Yeah.
first one is obviously taxation is theft.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Second
it
one
sounds.
is
Go
use
ahead.
Node 40 if you're to get out of trouble, to not be in trouble, rather.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like what they're treating, what you're talking about, is a treating of a currency as an actual speculative investment in the same way that a
Mm-hmm.
mutual fund would be treated. So,
Yes.
I own stock. I own shares of mutual funds. I own shares of direct stock. If that value goes up from year to
Mm-hmm.
year, and I don't sell it, then I experience a capital gain in terms of how the tax code is treats it. However,
Mm-hmm.
as far as I know, if I just buy a bunch of euros
Mm-hmm.
and the exchange rate fluctuates between the two over the course of the year, and let's say that the exchange value increases from the time I purchased it to the end of the year, as far as I know, I actually don't have to report that as a capital gains. So that seems to me like
Yeah.
a bizarre way to treat this, especially because if that's going to be the case, then the way that you should actually be reporting this is through quarterly reporting, which also requires reporting gains on just
Mm-hmm.
generic fluctuations throughout the year. So maybe this is where we kind of segue naturally over to what's happening with Odyssey. But this, I mean, and maybe I'm asking you a question. It's a matter of opinion. But does this not seem like a bizarre way to go about this?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I don't think the government planned for crypto. I don't think the government likes crypto. I don't think it ever really will. It's, I think, starting like just the fact there are some regulatory enforcement and framework conversations and blah blah, all this kind of stuff happening now, 12 years after the thing's been out. Like it's taken that long to figure out something. So that's a little bit goofy. And as you were saying, like with the SEC and library, so library, if of course, in case the viewers don't know, decentralized content protocol made by friends of ours, and basically the biggest thing built on it is something called Odyssey, which is like a YouTube alternative, except they can't take down your content or take away your money.
Okay,
And so,
stop right
yes.
there. There's a lot of people that may not understand what you just said. So I'm going to
All
dumb
right.
this down and tell me if I have this right.
Yeah, sure.
Library is the back end that supports Odyssey, which is an alternative to
Yes.
YouTube.
Yes, exactly. And there's a company in library is a decentralized protocol. It's like some software that anyone can use and build off of and stuff like that. But there is a company called Library Incorporated, which builds on this stuff. And that's an important distinction here, right? But it's because you cannot sue a decentralized protocol. It doesn't work. But
Yeah, it's off in the ether somewhere. Yeah.
yes, nice reference there. But the SEC is suing the company Library Incorporated for what it alleges is basically selling unlicensed securities or unregistered securities. And basically the case for that is a very strange one, in that they're saying, okay, you guys built a protocol that you built like a free open source software anyone can use, which includes these digital tokens, and you sold them to people for money, for what the government considers money at least. And because after that point you continued to build the product, you are somehow selling a security, and therefore you're bad, and therefore probably you owe us a ton of money or something like that.
I mean, that
So,
sounds like if I make cement blocks, then that would
mhm.
be a security, because obviously I'm going to tell people my cement blocks are better than your cement blocks.
Yeah, or let's just say this. What happens if you make a Tesla and you sell it to someone, and then the software updates and makes it a whole lot better, and like the autopilot works better, and now the lights have like a little dance party mode in them, and like all whatever crazy stuff that Elon's working on. Like, is that a security now because he sold something and it continued to be improved on after he sold it?
So where does this? So if the SEC is actually going to succeed in this case on the terms that
Mm-hmm.
they've presented, what does that mean then for the future of cryptocurrencies? Because Library does offer Library tokens, which are,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, a form of currency.
Yes, they're a form of currency, and also the thing that powers the whole thing. So for example, if you're this video file, let's just say you're wherever you're watching it, kind of like the URL, the actual link to the file is recorded on the LBRY blockchain somewhere, which uses the tokens to then pay to put it there. And it's like the same blockchain there. And so, and it does some other things like boosting content as far as if you like attach tokens to a certain piece of content, they're more visible and things like that. There's a bunch of things that work. It's not just like an in-game currency, although it does that too. It's actually used to just run the entire infrastructure, the entire back end of this whole like video site.
Yeah. So what does that mean then? If this ruling turns out to be, if the courts rule in favor of the SEC on the terms they've presented, then what does that mean for the future of cryptocurrency in general?
So I have an optimistic take on all this, but like the pessimistic thing is the literal thing kind of is if they win according to these things they were alleging, then the precedent is that anyone developing on basically any crypto as a security after this point, because let's just say you are a Bitcoin developer, you're working on the Bitcoin code, you're doing it for donations because Bitcoin can't pay you because it's not set up that way. And some like, hey, donate to me, I'll keep coding on Bitcoin. So you do that. And then at some point in the future, you have bills to pay. So you sell some Bitcoin so you can pay your rent. And then after that, you go back to work and keep on putting GitHub commits and stuff like that. Keep on, all of a sudden, that's a security. You sold unlicensed securities to whoever you sold to pay for your bills. It makes absolutely no sense. And it would be a huge detriment to crypto in the US. Like,
right. It would undermine its utility, you're saying.
Yes. Or basically, it would mean that no one would use crypto in the US, kind of. So that's like the worst case scenario. But I don't really think that's going to be a thing because the SEC has already said some really weird things like, oh yeah, Bitcoin and Ethereum are not securities. Or we don't think, they haven't actually ruled on this, by the way. They just like said it in the past. We don't think they're a security. And they even said about Ethereum, oh, well, yeah, we think that Ethereum's not a security. We think it might have started out as one, but over time it became not a security, which is kind of where it is now. So we're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean that's bizarre to me. That's hard for me to wrap my head around because it's almost like saying, investments in the euro are not a security, which is I'm pretty sure how the SEC treats investments in foreign currencies.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say Warcraft tokens, like Golden Warcraft. I know that because it's become an online RPG. I'm sure there are some back end ways to basically convert literal cash to gold to buy from somebody, right?
And vice versa, for sure.
Right. So is that gold then a security? Because the way the SEC's ruling is that gold is a security, but the euro isn't.
Yeah, and I guess it's because the euro is not continued to be developed on because it's not like a piece of technology. I guess like the idea of like a security is like you're selling a share or equity in a company that as a way of like raising money for it. And therefore, when you raise it before working on it, and then you raise money to work on it and build it. Whereas if you're selling a completed product, that's not a security. That's something else because you already finished it. So it's like sort of saying like selling Tesla stock when Tesla's a fledgling company that hasn't built a single car versus, selling a Tesla today, right? Yeah. It's like a completely different thing. The thing is like they're trying to they don't understand open source software clearly. And they don't understand how any of this stuff works or how, like, for example, is the dollar being developed on anymore? No, I mean, no, it is.
Well, the physical dollar obviously is.
Yeah,
like
but that's cash.
They're
paper.
Physically taking the paper and making it, different.
Yeah, but like
they don't ostensibly improves it.
Like the idea of the dollar's not being changed except for it's being inflated, really. And there's things like the cash associated with dollars might be being changed from time to time, but for the most part, it's not being changed. And if you have something like Bitcoin that's out there and you don't change it, it's going to get hacked and destroyed. Like literally, it just the only way it stays stable is by constantly being developed on and improved.
You're staying one chapter ahead of the class. That's all you're doing the entire time.
Yes, and so I guess what the SEC should be saying is, if they were trying to be a little more logical case, is if you are selling a token that doesn't do anything and it is not the final product, then that could be classified as a security. The problem is LBRY, the token, was a final product that continued to be developed and improved later. It was an actual end thing. You could take those tokens when they sold them and use them to host content on this platform and tip creators and push up your own stuff. You could already do everything you can do with them today. It just works better today. And I think that's the thing, is they just picked on a small fish. They had their quota of enforcement. They picked on some small fish and decided to say, hey, we're going to make an example out of these guys because we have our quota. And they didn't quite understand what they were in. So they just came up with some nonsense terms that they don't understand the precedent that this would set, really, how horrible of a precedent. And then, yeah, that's kind of where they're at there. I think they kind of bumbled their way into this case. So at least that's my point of view.
I might have Jeremy on later on to talk in greater detail about all of this. Jeremy Kaufman's a personal friend of the two of ours, who's also the chairman and CEO, as far as I can tell, of LBRY and of Odyssey. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, I mean, Odyssey is a product of LBRY Incorporated.
Right. It's basically a subsidiary company. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, folks, if you're interested, do check out their Twitter thread. It is the best and liveliest of Twitter threads out there right now. Odyssey is spelled Odyssee. I'll have that stinger come up in a minute just to plug my channel on there right now too. So they could use your help. Jeremy's getting his butt kicked by all of this in terms of just like how much it's exhausting him and how much time it's taking away from actually doing what he wants to do with a legitimate free speech alternative platform and a platform to YouTube. Mm-hmm. So guys, please do check them out. And I think that kind of concludes our how-to, because I didn't want to get too far away from the how-to. Because that's basically what we were trying to have the conversation.
Let me wrap it up with one thing, just saying, like I said at the beginning, with the plug, the search terms. Look for how to live on crypto. And that's on Odyssey, that's on YouTube, and I have 6 videos. That's going to be 7, but I'm going to continue the series with a whole bunch of other stuff. And so that, like, for example, episode 1 is about get a wallet, how to use the wallet, here, scan QR codes, all this stuff. Episode 2, buy some. Episode 3, and they're all like 5-minute videos or less. And it just kind of shows you how to do all this stuff. And so that is where I would go, because I was not satisfied that such a thing existed. So I made them. So there we go.
All right. So that kind of concludes the meat of our conversation. I'm about to get into Q&A. So folks, if you've got questions for Joel, please do put them in the chat. We already have some comments coming in. So yeah, just go ahead, shoot those questions. We'll get into that momentarily. Just before we do, while I'm getting that organized, Joel, how can people reach you?
Yeah. So as I said before, my channel, Digital Cash Network, is on Odyssey, on YouTube, on, Anchor or Spotify and all these kinds of places like that. It's everywhere. So look for that. It's a crypto show thingy though. So while it might be a little bit more, if you're not into crypto yet, it might go over your head, but there's a lot of newbie related stuff there too. But basically that's that. Everywhere on social media that you want to find me, follow me. I'm basically everywhere that can be. It's either it's more commonly by my nickname, The Desert Links, not Desert Linux, by the way, The Desert Links. And those 3 words. And yeah, just Twitter, Facebook, Minds, MeWe, Gab, Parler, Float, anything. I'm all over the place. You want
to give a quick plug to your favorite social alternative? Other than Odyssey. That's
a difficult one, because Odyssey is like the one that's good. All the other alt platforms are terrible, especially Parler. MeWe is okay. There's one I'm kind of consulting on building that's like based on blockchain stuff, which is that'll be a secret for now. But like,
all right, tease everybody with that. Awesome.
Basically, in the meantime, I don't know. Mine's is okay. MeWe's okay.
All right.
Twitter's fine. Twitter's really good still. It's censored. And it's terrible.
Jack is evil.
Yeah, until there's a Twitter alternative that works like Twitter.
Except without Jack.
Yes, and doesn't censor you to hell and back. That's going to be the best thing, because, like, I don't know. Just Facebook is the worst. That's all I have to say.
All right. So let's go into our Q&A. We only have, as far as I can tell, there's really only one comment to bring up here. And I'm sorry I cannot pronounce your name. It's in Cyrillic, and I can't read it. So Mike should install Dash Wallet to understand how this QR code thing works. Very cool. So that actually segues
Yes.
to a question from me then. That's coming basically from the audience. You talked about the how-to videos you're putting together for noobs, and I'm one of them. New Hampshire really isn't that far of a drive from Connecticut. So how would you feel about how would you feel about doing something together sometime where I bring up the camera crew and we show people physically how to go about this?
Yeah, sure.
And we
I
can
mean,
go into a store and I'll take out my phone and boom, that's how we buy a screwdriver.
well, yeah, a couple of years ago, CNN already followed me up and did the same thing. So you'd be real news would be following the steps of fake news.
Well, CNN might be the first mover, but I'll be the first honest mover. So
Yes, they
that'll
did
be
get some
interesting.
weird facts
We'll
wrong.
we'll have to be in touch about all of that, and we will follow up on that. So, folks, that'll be a great video that we'll be able to put together sometime. So we'll have to be in touch about all of that.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I don't see anything else in the chat here today. So, Joel, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, well, thanks. It's a great pleasure as always, and anytime.
And yeah, well, we will be in touch. So everybody who is watching at home, thanks for tuning in. We will have that follow-up video at some point. Not sure exactly when, but remember, I am making that transition to, oh, excuse me, folks. Technical difficulties again, as always. Yep, so...
That's my highlight. That's my highlight of the show is the technical difficulties.
Yes, it's always technical difficulties with when we bring on Joel. So, folks, if you want to follow me on Odyssey again, put that link in this video's description. Do check me out on there because I would like to transition over to Odyssey if I can. Right now, that isn't practical for me right this moment, but
I'll show you how to live stream there too.
We will be in touch about all of that. So, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Good night.